Good afternoon. Welcome to the Office of Early Childhood webinar, Risk Reduction in Child Care Programs, the Science and Art of Healthy Buildings. We're pleased to have you for this very important presentation on the science and importance of healthy air. Before we begin, let's just go over a couple of housekeeping notes. As we go through the webinar, if you have questions, please put them in the questions section of the control panel, not the chat. So go to that questions section. You'll see that in your toolbar. If you have questions related specifically to your licensed center or home, please remember that those should best be addressed with your licensor, so you can contact them. If you requested Spanish interpretation when you registered, you should have received a calendar invitation for a Teams meeting with Spanish audio. If you did not receive that invitation or you'd like Spanish audio, please send us your email in the questions pane and we'll send you that invitation. So today we're discussing the latest science on COVID-19 with special focus on healthy air, how to measure it, how to get it, and how it can maintain healthy settings in childcare now and beyond the pandemic. I'd like to now turn over to Commissioner Bai for our welcome. Commissioner Bai.
Thank you, Margaret. And Margaret, thank you for all your work on ESF 14 and on this issue of air quality. It's more important now than ever. I'm really grateful for your leadership. I hope you all enjoy the webinar today. We're bringing you this information to help you keep your program safe and so you can share information with others about how to do that. We will have another webinar about enhancing outdoor play at this time because that too is important to try to reduce the spread of the virus. What we're going to talk about today isn't just about COVID-19. We all know there have been issues of asthma, flu, and other viruses that pass in childcare programs and family childcare homes. And we also know that there are ways that we can improve those conditions. I'm really grateful to FEMA. They've been partnering for us throughout the pandemic to help us, and this issue keeps rising as an important one, so we wanted to share information with you. Really grateful to Chris Savitas, who's a senior environmental engineer, who's been a great resource to us. So thanks, everybody, and enjoy the webinar. Hi, Chris.
Nice to see you. Nice to be here. So we're privileged to have Professor Joe Allen, the Harvard School of Public Health, who's going to open it up with a presentation about air quality and the importance to child care and other settings. Joe Allen is an associate professor at the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health and also the director of the Harvard Healthy Buildings program, and they've been on the forefront of communicating the importance of indoor air quality concerns and developing some extremely useful guidance out there. So Joe, nice to have you.
Yeah, thanks, Chris, and thanks for everybody. I appreciate the invitation. My goal is to be a resource to you all, and I really want to get to the question and answer part so we can start to answer some specific questions here. So I'll ask Chris and others, be sure you can see my screen. Is that right? I'm now presenting. Someone give me a, okay, all right, terrific. Yes. So for background, I direct the Healthy Buildings program at the Harvard School of Public Health. Background is exposure and risk science. I'm a certified industrial hygienist. That's the field that anticipates, recognizes, assesses, controls hazards in the workplace, be it chemical, radiological, physical hazards, and in this case with COVID-19, a biological hazard. I've been advising, I was in consulting prior to being at the Harvard School of Public Health. And since last March, I've been advising across really almost every sector of the economy, K through 12 schools, universities, biotech, finance, pharma, jury trials, prison populations, police stations, early child care and community centers. So have seen and helped develop some of these risk reduction policies we're going to talk about, and I've also seen across, really almost a big swath of the U.S. economy. Have seen really what works well and what works maybe less so well. The slides you're going to see are really around our report. We wrote that's dedicated to K through 12 schools. So I know it's not exactly what we're talking about here, but a lot of it is relevant, and I'll make sure I pull out the parts that are relevant for you. And then the Q&A, we can talk about more specific environments, because I understand childcare learning is not very similar to K through 12 in that regard in terms of the structure of the buildings, but the fundamentals will absolutely be the same. And we did this report for K through 12 schools. I think there's an urgent need for a similar type report for early learning childcare centers. So let's start with some of the basics here about what we know about kids and transmission. And this applies to young kids as well, because it's important context as we start to think about what controls need to be in place to understand what are the risks in the different age groups. So the virus has spared us, hasn't spared us in any ways really, except for this one. Remarkably, kids are much less likely to get infected than adults, about 50%. If they do get it, the risk of dying is about 1 in a million, 10 to the minus 6, based on the latest reports from the medical journal JAMA. And the younger kids look like they're less likely to transmit. So we do get some benefits there. But it's important then to be sure that the risk reduction measures we're talking about are designed to protect, of course, not only kids, but adults and caregivers who share those same facilities, who are at higher risk. But important context here that it's different. You know, a room full of 30 adults is very different than a room full of kids with a handful of adults. I want to talk about what to do. And before we get into what to do, we really have to take a step back and say, well, what are we trying to protect against in the first place? So you have to think about the modes of transmission. And there are 3 modes of transmission that now are really well worked out, but it's been very confusing over the past year, unnecessarily so in my opinion. First is we can be exposed to this virus through close contact transmission. This is where the guidance for distancing, mask wearing comes into play. Second, we talk about transmission through contaminated surfaces. This is also called fomite transmission. And a fomite, that's just a word we use for any inanimate object that can serve as a source of transference for the virus. So if I was infectious, coughed on my hand, touched the doorknob is now a fomite. If I touched my phone, the phone could be a fomite. So any inanimate object can be a fomite, and that's just a way to say contaminated surface. Very little evidence that fomite transmission is happening. And the best way to deal with that is through hand hygiene. I'll talk more about this. Third one is really quite important, and that's the one that's been ignored for most of the past year. And we're just starting to see a more widespread recognition that airborne transmission is happening. And in this context, when I'm talking about airborne transmission, I'm talking about indoors beyond 6 feet if a building or room is underventilated, meaning the respiratory aerosols as someone talks or breathes or sings or coughs can build up indoors unless they're removed. So 3 modes of transmission, and then this hopefully helps to make sense of the controls. So don't mind the picture of the school here. You know, the same principles apply in terms of healthy building control strategies. We want to bring in more outdoor air, higher ventilation rates. We want better filters on the recirculated air, and we want to supplement that with portable air cleaners with HEPA filters. I'm going to talk about this in a second, but I want a big takeaway here is there are strategies that can be deployed in any indoor environment that don't have to cost a lot of money and that won't take months to implement. In fact, something like increasing outdoor air ventilation could be as simple as opening up the window just a couple of inches. But we do need to understand how to assess ventilation rates and really understand what it is, and also set some targets around this, right? When I say we want higher ventilation rates, well, what does that actually mean? So here is how we've been approaching it and giving guidance to schools, and it applies to any small volume place, classrooms, good for rooms in a home, an office. It doesn't, I would say different strategies we can talk about if it's a large auditorium or a gymnasium. But here it is, an air change per hour, just for definitions, is the amount of air that comes in from outside and changes or exchanges the indoor air. So you're cleaning or diluting that air. For reference, a typical home in the United States gets half an air change per hour. A typical school gets 1.5 air changes per hour. We recommend targeting at least 4, hopefully higher, 4 to 6 air changes per hour. And if you think about 6 air changes per hour, that means every 10 minutes, the full volume of space in that room is exchanged. Now there's issues with mixing and things like this, but conceptually that's what's happening. So you want to get to 4 to 6 air changes per hour, recognizing that most places are not achieving that right now. And you can get there through any combination of better ventilation and filtration. So we prioritize here the 1, 2, 3. First, more outdoor air. That's ideal. So if you have natural ventilation, that's opening up the windows. If you have a mechanical system, an HVAC system, you want to be sure it's set to bring in more outdoor air. Particularly in winter and summer, our mechanical ventilation systems are designed to limit how much outdoor air comes in to conserve energy. So we want to override that system as best we can. 2, increase the level of filter efficiency. So most buildings that have a mechanical ventilation system recirculate a large percentage, most of the year, of that indoor air. Most of it's running through a filter called a MERV-8 filter, MERV, MERV-8 filter. That captures about 20% of airborne particles that we're interested in. That's not enough. We recommend upgrading to a MERV-13 or better filter. 3, if you can achieve 4 to 6 air changes per hour through 1 or 2, you can supplement this with the use of a portable air cleaner with a HEPA filter. This is a great strategy, relatively lower cost. Well, it's lower cost than the others and relatively lower cost. For $200 or $300 for a room, you can get a portable air cleaner with a HEPA filter that will give you 4 air changes per hour. These are the air cleaners you'd see, at the local hardware store sells these. You can find them online. We have a tool at my Harvard website. The Harvard Healthy Buildings program is at forhealth.org. I can give you this resource later. We have a page dedicated to schools. We actually have a tool there that will help you pick the right portable air cleaner. You enter in the size of your room, and it'll tell you what to look for when you go to purchase an air cleaner. Importantly, if you're going to go with the air cleaner route, we can talk more about this with Chris in the Q&A. You don't want any bells and whistles. You don't want or need UV or ionization or some fancy sensor network. Just the basics: a good fan and a good HEPA filter. We think about how to go to assessing this. For many people, they're not quite sure. We built a 5-step guide for how to assess ventilation rates, also available at our Healthy Buildings program website. In this picture, we have 2 of our engineers with what's called an air flow capture hood or a bolometer, just simply measuring how much air is going in. And the blue hood there is covering the air intake for this school. The air intake comes through the wall there. And the 444 depicted in the picture on the right is just the airflow. So you can actually use the airflow rates if you have a mechanical system. If you only have open windows and you're trying to find out the CO2 concentration, there's a couple other tricks in our guide. You can use carbon dioxide as a tracer gas. Just this morning, we released a brand new tool where you can use a CO2 monitor as a way to determine how well ventilated your space is. So we built a tool, simple tool online. You enter in the size of your room, number of people in the room, and it'll tell you the maximum carbon dioxide concentration that should be allowed in that room. So a nice quick way to figure out if you're getting good ventilation if you don't have a mechanical system or a fancy mechanical system that tells you exactly what's happening. There are other tricks, and we have tools for you there. And this is what it looks like if you're looking at carbon dioxide concentrations. You can measure CO2, and we built these tools so it simplifies it. But basically, I wanted to show that when we've done these kind of tests with open windows and looking at mechanical ventilation, when we open up the windows, even 3 inches, doors open, so you get some cross breeze, you can get easily 4 or 5 air changes per hour just through opening windows. Sometimes this can be well over 10 air changes per hour, depending on the weather and the wind and things like that. So it's very achievable to get this 4 to 6 air changes per hour through any of the combination of the factors we're talking about. I do want to talk about 2 other things before I open up for Q&A. One is distancing. So this is a real challenge for early childcare, same with schools. And I wrote an op-ed back in November with a colleague, Dr. Sarah Bleich, formerly at the Harvard School of Public Health, now in the Biden-Harris administration, arguing that because the risks of transmission and the risks, if they get it, are lower, that kid-to-kid interaction, we shouldn't be using that 6-foot cutoff. So we recommend adult to adult stay 6 feet. The de-densification is a good idea. Distancing is a good idea. Transient interactions within 3 feet is okay. But you want to be distanced. But we saw many locations using distancing by itself without the context of other controls as the sole limiting factor or deciding factor. Last thing I want to say is, I forgot to take the airport label. I'm showing this slide in my next presentation to the National Academies on airplanes. So it works for both. You can ignore the airplanes and airports up top. I apologize for that. That's sloppy. But I wrote an op-ed in the Washington Post, last week, talking about better masks. And really, this is something that everyone can do right now, even in light of these new variants that are more highly transmissible, to better protect yourself and others. And so it comes from these two factors, the two F's, filtration and fit, determine how well a mask works. So on filtration, it's how well it filters, and fit is how well it conforms to your face. We're well past where we were a year ago, where it'd say, well, any cloth mask is good. It's true, any mask is better than no mask, but we know that certain masks perform better. And here's my cheat sheet on the left there. If you want good protection, or you want a higher level of protection, an N95, if you can find one, this is a US designated mask. There are shortages still for health care, unbelievably, a year into this. So if you can't find that, I recommend the KF94 or the FF2 out of Europe, KF94 out of South Korea. These are high efficiency masks, and the certifications out of Europe and South Korea can be trusted. The KN95s are widely available, similar to an N95. These are KN95s. But here I would just urge some caution, because there have been counterfeit KN95s. So you need to do your homework. If you're going to buy a KN95, go on the CDC website or the FDA website and search and make sure the manufacturer that you're buying from, or the brand you're buying, is the legitimate brand. Fourth, there's something you can do right now if you want higher protection and you're not quite sure about these masks, you can't access one of these better masks, and that's double masking. And this is really simple because most people can have access to these lower cost or cheaper masks, and they work well. So I would do a surgical mask, the blue surgical mask, and on top of it, a cloth mask. And the surgical mask is providing good filtration, about 70% efficiency. The cloth mask on top provides the fit, helps it push it down over your nose, flush on your cheeks and around your chin. Number 5, blue surgical mask, and then 6th, a good fitting cloth mask, preferably a 3-layer mask. All right, all of these resources that I'm talking about are available at our schools.forhealth.org website. If you just Google the Harvard Healthy Buildings Program, you'll find forhealth.org, and we have a page on schools where we have guides and all of these tools I've talked about for carbon dioxide sensors, how to pick a portable air cleaner for your classroom, and this full-length report that is designed for K through 12 schools, but has broader application for many other environments, including early childcare, early learning. So with that, I will turn it back over to Chris and look forward to our conversation.
Thank you, Joe. So we're available to field any questions that folks have.
So Chris, I can hop in and let you know some of the things that have been coming up. One question that a provider asked is, can opening the top of a double window versus the bottom help as much with air circulation, trying to keep the cold air off of children? Which window do you open, and how do you balance that having young children around?
Yes, a really good comment. And understand, particularly where we are, it's quite cold out. My window's open a couple inches right now. I can still see snow. So, if you can open the top of the window, that's great, because the thermal, there'll be a thermal plume in the room, and then you'll kind of create circulation. That hot air hopefully will go out, and you bring in some new air to replace it. At a minimum, it'd be great to have 2 windows open as far apart from each other as possible, so you can create some kind of cross action going. Opening a door would help. And remember, in the winter, it doesn't take much in terms of opening windows to create enough of that air movement, largely because of that temperature gradient that exists. So I understand that the cold and their energy concerns too, of course, but in the middle of a pandemic, we're trying to keep everybody safe. I'd say this is a time to encourage people to dress warmer, wool hats, that kind of thing in schools and wherever, because really that's the simplest, quickest way to improve your ventilation. Now, if it's too cold and you have to keep windows closed, then the portable air cleaner approach is really the way to go.
Yeah, another question, Joe, we have is how do I know what kind of HVAC system I have? So I imagine a lot of folks are renting or maybe don't control the space, and they need to get together with their facility managers and landlords. What would you add to that, Joe?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I'd say the first thing to do is ask about it, right? And I think you'll learn a lot based on the answer you'll get. And you could even say, look, I heard we need enhanced ventilation, more outdoor air. I heard about MERV 13 filters. Are we doing that in this building? And so we have a guide for, it was designed for parents on our website, 20 questions every parent should ask, but take a look through there because there's 20 questions really anybody should ask about the building before they go to work or even bring anybody else into that space to start asking these questions. And one thing that I would recommend everybody do if you control your space or not is something called commissioning. You can hire an engineering firm, a commissioning agent. First step to do is, and commissioning, if you're not familiar with that, that's simply like what we do for buildings. That's equivalent to giving your car a tune-up every year. Somebody comes in, make sure the system's running right, the fans are working, filters are installed correctly, things like that. And that'll go a long way to making sure your system's okay.
I would add to that, if there's a silver lining to this pandemic, for those of us that have been concerned with indoor air quality, it's that the tremendous co-benefits of all this focus now and potential improvements that will be realized in indoor air quality and in buildings is that we'll have potentially a lot more people focused on this, generally improving filtration, air exchange, which will reduce other airborne illnesses. And Joe didn't even have time to go through this in his presentation, but co-benefits on cognition and performance, child's performance in schools, and on and on. And the next question we have is, how do I know what filters to ask for at the hardware store? And will the usual hardware stores have them, or are these special ordered? I know you mentioned the MERV 13 designation.
Yeah, that's a really great question. So these filters are commonly available, and your local hardware store should have them, or the big box hardware stores. And so if you go in and you say, look, I typically have a MERV 8 filter, I'm looking for a MERV 13 filter, they'll be able to point you to one of these higher efficiency filters. Same thing, most of these stores will have these portable air cleaners with the HEPA filters, and same thing. So you can look for I can explain that the portable air cleaner, we can go into a bit more depth into if you want to understand which one you might want to buy if you're thinking about it for a particular room. But these are also devices you can get at a local hardware store.
And do you know if these types of filters are running short in supply, or are these still generally readily available?
So MERV 13 filters, there have been some supply issues. That said, my understanding is that they're becoming a lot more available because there's been a ramp up over the past year. If you can't get a MERV 13, look for a MERV 12 or a MERV 14. So try to find a workaround there. Anything is better than, any upgrade. If you currently have a MERV 8, again, that's MERV, a MERV 8, look for a any higher efficiency filter. We recommend a minimum MERV 13. Now, importantly, I want to clarify something on filters. These HEPA filters, HEPA HEPA filters that you might see that capture 99.97% of particles, most mechanical systems in a building can't handle a HEPA filter. They'll handle a MERV 13. And the reason is that the HEPA filter is harder to push air through. And most building systems are not designed with enough power to push through a HEPA filter for a long time. So MERV 13 for your central system, But if you're going to go with a portable air cleaner, those are designed for HEPA filters. So for a portable air cleaner system, you want to look for one that has a HEPA filter.
And we have some questions around the types of disinfectants. So what are the safest disinfectants to use with children around? And, you know, that might address even air spread is the rest of the question.
So the surface, so we should start with, again, the modes of transmission. And surface cleaning is designed to protect against contaminated surfaces, obviously. But the most effective way to prevent spread through contaminated surfaces is good hand hygiene. So frequent hand washing or frequent use of hand sanitizer. That's more important than frequent cleaning and disinfecting of surfaces, because you'd really have to clean and disinfect every single surface in between every single contact to fully eliminate that spread. It's much easier to break that chain of transmission through hand washing or hand sanitizer. Now, in terms of chemicals, coronaviruses, this virus is a coronavirus, they're very easy to inactivate on surfaces. I would say kill on surfaces, but they're technically not alive, but so inactivate on surfaces. So it doesn't take much, right? You don't need a heavy industrial cleaner, or nor do you need one of these fogging machines. Simple cloth and an EPA registered disinfectant, and you don't need anything too strong. Coronaviruses are easy to kill or inactivate on surfaces.
Joe, I know you've written on this recently, and there is a genuine concern about, you know, overemphasis on cleaning of surfaces and maybe using too much disinfectant too often, because those themselves are exposure risk, and you know, we'll all end up in a watershed. I'm sure we'll be studying this for years, the impact of all these disinfectants.
Yeah, I work with a community childcare center and others, and have learned the enormous cost to this enhanced cleaning, both in terms of the product that's purchased and the people power, just the resources, the intensity. And it's actually taking away time and attention from these more important modes of transmission, like through the air. So it's not to say that surfaces are not important, they're just a lot less important. And we are over cleaning, and we can share an op-ed I wrote in the Washington Post with a colleague, other colleagues, showing that this is really a lower risk than other routes of transmission. And again, it can be more easily broken through good hand hygiene. So that should be the focus. And you mentioned something else that's really important. If you're going to be cleaning a lot indoors, be mindful that some of these chemicals, many of them, can be respiratory hazards. And so you want to be sure you're protecting yourself and others in the space. Interestingly, and a good thing, if you're practicing good ventilation, so bring in good outdoor air, that can help also dilute the concentration of the cleaning chemicals in the indoor air as well.
And every dollar, you know, wasted on excessive cleaning is resources obviously diverted from the core services that you all provide. Next question goes to masking. So shouldn't N95 masks be reserved for medical professionals? I think that was the early guidance from the CDC early in the epidemic.
Yes, so early on, that was absolutely key. We didn't have enough N95s in healthcare. We've recovered from that, but I still know there are shortages in healthcare. And it's actually hard to come by N95s. That's why my piece I wrote last week was really to urge and spur on the American government to increase and scale up the production and distribution of these better masks. And in fact, a couple days after that piece came out, several senators, Bernie Sanders, a couple representatives, including Adam Schiff, sent a letter to President Biden with that same message, the call for an upscale and production of better masks. If you can't get an N95, and that's okay, these KF94s are a really good substitute, 94% rather than 95%. Some find the KF94s more comfortable. I actually have a KF94 right here. It's what I've been wearing. Looks like a regular old mask, right? It's got the ear loops, and it has good filtration. And importantly, these also have good fit, right? They'll go over my bridge of my nose, well under the chin, flush on your cheeks. So that's a nice substitute. These are widely available right now as well.
Next question, gets to the diversity of the different types of childcare providers that are out there. And this one's from home providers asking, what practices would you recommend to get air exchange once the children have left the home at the end of the daycare day?
So am I hearing that right? That it's what do you do after people leave to kind of flush out the home type?
Correct.
Yeah. So the good news here is that it doesn't take long to flush these respiratory aerosols out of the air. So if someone was in the room and was there that day and they were infectious, whatever's escaped through the mask, within about an hour, if you have decent ventilation, within about an hour, most of what's in the air is going to be diluted, right, with some decent air exchange happening. So if you wanted to do a flush out, let's say, I would say open up the windows, maybe even a bit more, put on your winter coat. That's what needs to be done, or keep those portable air cleaners running on high. But it doesn't take long. Early on, I heard a lot of building owners saying they were going to run their systems 24/7, all day, all night, all weekend. You don't really need to do that. It only takes, the guidance we've been giving formally is say, let these things run on full speed for 2 hours after people leave, and that should be really sufficient.
And the next question, and we touched on this a little bit earlier, it says, will these systems, upgrading of HVAC systems, will these help with other illnesses?
Yeah, this is really an opportunity, I think, for everybody to think hard about all of these spaces where we spend our time and how they haven't been performing for us before COVID. And so we know that these enhancements we're talking about are actually good investments, not just for right now, but also going forward. For example, higher ventilation rates and better filtration are associated with lower infectious disease transmission pre-COVID. In other words, for influenza, right? We know that these help with influenza. We know better ventilation and filtration is associated with reductions in asthma attacks. We know better ventilation and filtration are associated with fewer headaches, fewer missed school days, fewer missed work days, better cognitive function, better performance on math tests, better performance on reading comprehension tests. So there's a whole range of benefits, not just on disease avoidance. Right now we're focused on disease avoidance, but importantly, health is more than avoiding disease. It's also about well-being and health promotion. And these improvements to the building, our homes, our schools, places of worship, if we do these improvements, they will provide long-term benefits beyond COVID. So these are, plexiglass should go away. I'm not even sure it's warranted in the first place, but these enhancements to ventilation and filtration should stay even after COVID goes away.
Yeah, I'll add to that. I think a lot of people are, might be saying, well, we have now vaccines being distributed, and at some point, we'll get to a herd immunity and we won't need all these upgrades. But there's a concern that, building resiliency, again, for the next, not just to reap the co-benefits that Joe outlined, but thinking of that a next inevitable pandemic. This isn't the last pandemic that's gonna come along. Next question we have, do we need to open a window in every room to get the best results? And what about skylights?
Yeah, so, you can, I love the idea of opening up skylights. Again, that creates this, we call a stack effect. You think of it like a chimney where our bodies are emitting heat, right? You have this, the plume goes up and out. That's terrific. The more windows you can open, the better. I think you could think maybe it's even obvious, right? Think about trying to, on a nice spring day, trying to get that nice air in a space. Well, if you open one window, you get a little bit of that. You open up another one across the house, open up a door, another window somewhere else, and you can really start to feel that air moving around. That's what we're trying to get here. So the more, the better. There are tricks for how you can assess the amount of ventilation. I'll show you one right now. It requires a little more technical expertise, but I'll tell you this morning we released a tool on our Healthy Buildings website to help you do this a bit better. And you can measure the carbon dioxide concentrations if you want to get a sense of how well ventilated your space is. So what I'm showing here is a CO2 monitor, carbon dioxide monitor. It's measuring 860 parts per million. That's pretty good. You'd probably want to be around 800 or less in terms of this level. And this is, while we are breathing, we're emitting carbon dioxide. And so that's a useful indicator of how well a space is ventilated. Now, my window's open 2 or 3 inches. I'm the only one in here. And it's a pretty well ventilated space. The tool we released on our website today allows you to go in, enter the size of the room, number of people, number of children, number of adults, and it'll tell you what the maximum level you should be allowed to have in your place. It'll say, make sure it's under 900 parts per million. If you go above that, it tells you need more air, open another window. If you're below it, you're in good shape.
And we might argue that that's one of the best ways to know when you have to intervene. So, open the windows early in the day, but you may have to open them throughout the day depending on the types of levels that you're getting. Now the question about, a lot of classrooms, some buildings do not have operable windows. And so how would you prioritize, strategies to ensure you're getting the right ventilation in those spaces?
Yeah, if your building does not have operable windows, it should have other means of ventilation, right? Based on the building codes. Now, there are all sorts of different buildings out there that may not be meeting this. But if you can't open your windows, you should have other means of ventilation. Unit ventilator, the types of ventilators that are along the wall, for example. But here's what you can do if you're in a position where you really don't have ventilation or you're not quite sure. This is where those portable air cleaners with filters can be really valuable, because you don't even have to know much about ventilation, because you can make up for it with filtration. Remember, it's any combination of ventilation and filtration. So if you use our tool to pick the portable air cleaner that's sized right for the room, you can get 4 air changes per hour with one of these air cleaners through filtration. So you don't even have to worry about ventilation. Now, they're additive, meaning if you can also open up the window a little bit, great. If you can also put in better filters on your central mechanical system, great. If you can bring in more out air through your HVAC system, great. And the portable air cleaner running all the time too. So more is better, and they're additive. And so it's outdoor air or any combination of outdoor air plus filtration.
And we question about advanced air quality techniques like is ultraviolet, systems, are those types of systems effective? When would you want to use those, or would you want to use those?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I'm intentional about listing the top 3 in my slides before going to what are these advanced air cleaning technologies. So first, outdoor air, like we've been talking about, MERV 13 filters on recirculated air, portable air cleaners with HEPA. If you can't achieve the air cleaning you need through those means, you can think about these more advanced techniques. Ultraviolet light, ultraviolet germicidal irradiation can inactivate biologicals, viruses, and other in the air, and can be effective. Now you have to be careful here. Usually it's more expensive, takes a bit more expertise to be sure it's installed correctly. Doesn't take much to open up your window, but if you do UV, you're gonna have to hire an expert. Be careful because it's a radiation hazard, but it can be effective. And you can have induct UV, where it would replace a filter, for example. So I would just say, I guess when I think about UV, I would say first I would exhaust these other solutions, which are more cost effective, less complicated, and really quite effective. That's not to say there's not a use for some of these more advanced techniques in limited instances. In a large volume space, for example, gymnasium or places of worship, sometimes high ceilings, you could have what we call upper room UV. This is where you're shining the UV light way above people, so there's no radiation hazard. But as the air naturally through buoyancy circulates through the room, it goes up and down all the whole time, right? Every time it goes up into that UV light, everything in that air is inactivated. You can get 20 air changes per hour with what's called upper room UV. But again, that's another system that is a bit more complicated and it's going to require, bringing on an expert to install it correctly.
And I think a take-home message is there's not one, silver bullet for this. And this is emphasized in Joe's K through 12 school guidance. It's a layering of defenses and making sure you're taking care of the basics first. We have a question about temperature and humidity and what the optimal ranges are for those for healthy buildings and for addressing COVID.
Yeah, great question. And we think about, these temperature and humidity can influence the virus and our health in different ways. And mostly we think about humidity as more important than temperature. And I'll first caveat this before I say anything else about humidity, that humidity control I think of as a nice to have, not a must have. So let me tell you about the science for how humidity influences this virus and our health. When the relative humidity is between 40 and 60%, we get some benefits. First, our respiratory system functions better when it's in that humidity range. Our first line of defense in our lungs, we have a mucus layer and we have our cells that line our lungs that have cilia, right? Little hair-like features out of the cells. Well, the mucus traps particles we inhale, and the cilia are constantly beating and bringing those particles up where we then swallow them harmlessly. So that's a great defense in our lungs. It's called mucociliary clearance, or the mucociliary escalator. So that's great. And turns out at 40 to 60% relative humidity, these cells and cilia, you have more mucus and they're beating faster. So you have a lot more capture of these particles and you clear them out. You bring them up and swallow them. Great. When the humidity gets to 20%, well, the cilia beat more slowly, you produce less mucus. So you've lost the defense in your lungs, or it's weakened. On the virus side, humidity also matters. So at 40 to 60% relative humidity, most viruses actually stay viable shorter. I can say that a lot better. When it's drier, they'll be viable in the air and on surfaces for a longer amount of time. So at 40 to 60% relative humidity, we get a benefit both with the virus survival's less long, and our lungs perform better. So then why is it a nice to have, not a must have? The reality is humidity is really hard to control in buildings, and it's really hard to retrofit an existing building system for humidity. And you need to be very careful if you're adding water in a building. You can very quickly create situations where you have water buildup, condensation, mold growth. So that requires some care. Now, if you're in a smaller room, you could have a portable humidifier that we've done these kind of modeling analyses and shown that you can use one of these portable devices to bring the level of humidity up into that 40 to 60% range. But to do this on a whole building level is going to be quite expensive and also is going to require a lot of care that you're not inadvertently creating conditions that are conducive to mold growth.
The next question has to do with, I think it's going to get into portable air cleaners. It's you have an older type building with HVAC systems that either they cannot be modified or modifications would not be planned. You can't really get the MERV filters in there to move the particles. So what would you do then?
Yeah, so let me give some more detailed guidance on these portable air cleaners and how to size that, right? Because I think it makes sense and it's intuitive that if you buy a small air cleaner for a big room and put the air cleaner in the corner, that's not going to do anything. So what you want to look for when you're purchasing a portable air cleaner is what's called the Clean Air Delivery Rate, or CADR, Clean Air Delivery Rate. The Clean Air Delivery Rate is simply a rating system that's used that tells you not only how good the filter is, and if it's a HEPA filter, it captures just close to 100%, but also how much air goes through that. right? You could have the world's best filter with not a lot of air going through it. That's not going to do much. You could also have the world's best fan that blows a lot of air, but it's a terrible filter. That's not helping. So this clean air delivery rate combines both factors. And what you're looking for, here's a rule of thumb. You want a clean air delivery rate of 300 for every 500 square feet of space, assuming 8 or 10 foot ceilings. So I'll say that again. Rule of thumb, look for a CADR, clean air delivery rate, of 300 for every 500 square feet of space. That will give you over 4 air changes per hour. If that sounds not like your space and you want to fine tune that, I can point you to our tool on our website, where again, you enter in the size of your room, enter in the ceiling height, and it'll tell you what clean air delivery rate to look for. And if for anybody who's technical and that you want to understand the math, it's not overly complicated, but I'll explain it quickly. If you want to determine how many air changes per hour you're getting from a clean air delivery rate, it's this formula. And it's, we can put it in the chat maybe, but it'll sound complicated, but I promise it's not. You take the CADR and multiply it by 60. So CADR times 60 divided by the volume of the room. That's it. And volume of the room, again, is length times width times height. So square footage of the room plus the ceiling height times the ceiling height. So again, CADR times 60 divided by the volume of the room. That's how many air changes per hour you're getting. So you can look at a box, look online, look for a good portable air cleaner with a HEPA filter, has a CADR of 300. Great. Multiply that times 60, divide it by the size of the room you want to use it in, and that'll tell you how many air changes per hour you're getting. And recall, our target is 4 to 6 air changes per hour.
The next question is, what is the cost for some of these, approximate cost for some of these interventions? And, what advice do you have on finding the right expertise to advise providers on implementing these changes?
Yeah, really great question. So the portable air cleaners I'm talking about, for a good one that'll give you, that's as a CADR of about 300, you'll probably spend $200 or $300 for that air cleaner. That's a good plug and play solution. It's going to be cheaper than an overhaul of your mechanical system, your ventilation system. Opening up the windows, you're going to pay a cost for energy. You're going to lose some heat for sure. The MERV 13 filter costs a couple extra dollars compared to a MERV 8 filter, but your system works a bit harder. So again, your energy expenditure will be higher. And so I think that's a really good, thinking about the costs here and how to protect ourselves. These are, we have the operational costs from energy, but also then the equipment costs. So, but a good portable air cleaner, you shouldn't be spending $500, $600, $700 for a portable air cleaner. If you are, I would urge you to pause for a second, take a step back. You're probably paying for things you don't need, sensors and remote start and filters you don't need. You just want a good fan, a good HEPA filter, and that's it.
And helping to identify resources for these things is part of the work that FEMA is engaged in around this issue. That's a big part of what we're going to be focused on in the coming days and weeks. Someone interested in clarifying the physical distancing recommendations that you presented.
Yeah, so I should be clear here that the formal recommendation has not changed from CDC, and that 6 foot distancing is the norm and should stay. I presented our scientific analysis on exposure to, some schools are actually starting to use what we have put forward, because the science is clear that if you have robust controls in place, like masking, ventilation, filtration, distancing is important, but becomes less important. If you think about when we first started here, learning about the benefit of 6 foot distancing, it was last February and March, before widespread masking was in place. And so we have to think about the controls holistically. We think about all the layers of defense, and masking is the most important. And we can look at what happens in healthcare, where they can't physically distance, right? In a hospital, they're all on top of each other. But they've minimized risk through good hand hygiene, good masks, and hospitals do a really good job with their buildings, ventilation and filtration, despite not being able to distance. Also would note that the World Health Organization uses a 3-foot cutoff. So from a scientific perspective, we feel that 3 foot is okay for kid to kid or child to child interactions. Adults should try to stay further apart. But it's a good question because I should reiterate that the official guidance is still 6 feet.
And folks are asking about bathrooms, speaking to ventilation in bathrooms and any kind of special considerations for addressing virus spread in those areas.
Yeah, really good question. So of course we have a lot of shared surfaces. So to address that, that's just good hand hygiene, of course, before and after using the bathroom. So that's critically important. In terms of bioaerosols, we can detect this virus in stool. When you flush a toilet, you can generate bioaerosols that will stay aloft. So probably feeling redundant at this point, but hopefully that's a good thing. We need to pay attention to ventilation and filtration in the bathroom. The good news here for bathrooms is that the code minimums, the building codes, require higher ventilation in the bathroom already. So if your building is meeting these minimum standards for ventilation in a bathroom, it should quickly flush the air out. And that could be from open windows or usually a bathroom fan. So you do have to check to be sure that your bathroom fans are working, they're running right, pulling out enough air. And it's easy to tell when a bathroom is not functioning well in terms of ventilation because of odor, right? And that's largely where these ventilation standards are set for bathrooms. It's around odor control. So, there's a quick way to assess whether or not your systems are working. And again, I would say if they're not, there's a problem, the fans aren't working, it's taking months to find an engineer to fix it. The simple solution of the air cleaner in that space works really well. Generally smaller volume spaces of a bathroom. Size this portable air cleaner right, have it running in there, and it's constantly cleaning the air through good HEPA filters.
And I saw a comment asking us to speak a little bit more slowly, so I apologize for myself. Question about cleaning frequently touched objects, say toys, in a childcare facility.
Yeah, I apologize for speaking quickly too. It's I'm in Boston, but I'm a New Yorker, so I tend to speed up when I'm presenting. So apologies. Yeah, in terms of cleaning toys and cleaning surfaces, it's similar to what we talked about earlier and placing exposure and risk in context. We're much more likely to be infected through shared air than we are through shared surfaces. That means a shared surface or toys, doorknobs, countertops. So I don't think it's going to be effective to be constantly cleaning and disinfecting every single surface a kid touches all day long. The better approach is to periodically, I think it's important to clean and disinfect surfaces periodically, not all day frequently, but it's more important to mix in and make it part of your culture of constant or frequent hand washing or use of hand sanitizer and wiping hands down. So because if you think about it, you'd have to clean every surface every single time it was touched to break that mode of transmission. Now, remember, kids are less likely to get infected than adults. So this good hand hygiene is even more important for the adults, right? So if you're wearing a mask, that's good. You should be touching your mucous membranes less often with a mask on, not touching your mouth or touching your nose. That's good. And also you want to build in strict hand washing and use of hand sanitizer for the adults who are interacting with the children in the same objects, so they can break that chain of transmission if they happen to pick up a toy or touch a doorknob that has a high viral load on it because someone else just touched it. Maybe after coughing right on their hands, they went and touched a doorknob. Here's a nice benefit for masks wearing. For fomite transmission to happen, or contaminated surfaces, right? That surface has to get contaminated in the first place. If I'm wearing a mask and I sneeze or cough, well, the amount that gets through the mask and on the surface is going to be very low. It's also less likely that I'm going to cough in my hand and then touch a doorknob. So masking is actually helping prevent contaminated surfaces in two different ways. One, direct deposition or dropping out of the air onto surfaces, and two, from touching your own hand and then touching a surface.
And we have a question. I know you covered the different types of masks in your briefing, but maybe worth reviewing those with a specific question of, again, maybe asking for you to clarify what specific information are you looking for to make sure you're avoiding those counterfeit masks.
Yeah, maybe I'll pull up this slide again because there's hopefully some good information there. It has my a little cheat sheet here. So can you see that slide, Chris? Yes?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, so here's what you want to look for. Remember, it's the two F's, filtration and fit. So filtration will be reported by the mask, and I'll put some numbers on this. An N95, number one on the list, gets 95% capture of respiratory particles. KF94, as it implies, 94%, FF2 and the KN95 there also right around 95%. So that's really quite good. The double masking, cloth mask with the surgical mask with a cloth mask on top, that gets you about 91%. That's great. Good blue surgical mask gets you about 70%. So you can, and that's all the filtration side of this, right? The 95%, 70%. Cloth mask can be anything from 25% to 70%. So that's half of the issue. That's the filtration part. The other half is fit. You want to be sure that the mask, it works for you, meaning you want it over the bridge of the nose, around the cheeks, and flush against your skin and around your chin. You can do something called a user seal check. A user seal check is something that's done in hospitals all the time. Take your mask, after it's on your face, put your hands over the mask like this, now on your face. You want to block the air pretty good through the filter. And you blow out or breathe in and see if the mask pressure changes. And what you're trying to feel is air slipping in through the side, or is air coming out through the top or outside? So you can do these user seal checks. Look in the mirror. Okay, I'll do it for you. Put it on, right? You want to put the loops on like this. Make sure you have one of these with the metal wire is great. You fit it over your nose. This is good over my nose, good over my cheeks, down under my chin. So that's a pretty good fit. Now I can do this user seal check. I'm breathing in and blowing out, and I'm not feeling any air here or on the side. So that tells me I have a pretty good fit. And so you could do this every time you put on a mask, or if you're trying out different masks or different cloth masks, to check the fit of the mask. Make sure that air is going through the mask and not finding ways out through the side. I hope that's helpful there.
Thanks, Joe. And the designations, again, the N95 is the domestic manufacturer, where the others are foreign manufacturer. I believe the KN95 is Chinese manufacturer. And so I imagine the N95 masks, the domestic masks, will have the sort of certifications from CDC, NIOSH, those U.S. organizations, U.S. government sanctioned recommendations that they meet. But the foreign ones, no matter what type, would you look for the NIOSH or other designations to accompany those? So how do you look up for, because you say NIOSH certificate for the KN95s, but I imagine you'd look for that for the KF94 or FF2s as well?
Yeah, so really good
Sure.
question here. So the N95, right, is a US designation. You can have a lot of comfort in an N95. I haven't seen reports of counterfeit N95s. Could that happen? I guess, but I would feel confident in an N95 purchased in the United States. I also have a lot of confidence in the KF94 and the FF2 in Korea and Europe. because they have stringent protocols and manufacturing protocols and certifications. I haven't seen any reports of counterfeit masks from South Korea or Europe. KN95s are not just from China. They're from many different countries. The problem is we have seen counterfeit KN95s and a lot of them. And so a KN95 can work just great if it's from a reliable and trusted source. So what I think for the KN95s, and these are more available, like if you go online and try to find a KN95, you'll find one. You just need to be careful and look at the manufacturer that's selling the mask, then go to either the FDA or the CDC website and try to find that manufacturer to be sure it's legitimate. So the reason I put it third is because it requires a lot more work if you're going to buy a KN95. If I saw an N95, I'd feel good. If I have a KF94, I feel good about it. If I was buying a KN95, I would spend a half hour or an hour researching it to be sure I was getting the protection I thought I was getting. Only because we've seen KN95s that perform at 25% efficiency or worse. They're worse than a bad cloth mask, some of them.
And I'll say that that FEMA, as well as the different state emergency management organizations like Connecticut, Department of Emergency Management and Homeland Security, they've been engaged heavily in the subject of the right types of masks and mask distribution. So there's probably resources out there from both those organizations. We can look towards making those, flagging those for folks. Back to the questions, and we know that Joe has to leave shortly. So Joe, you tell us. We're up on 2 o'clock right now. We seem to have a few more questions in the chat.
Yeah, do another couple 5 minutes here or something.
Yeah, there's a question about do these N95 and other masks that we just went over, do they require cleaning, and how often do you replace them? I know that's another area that gets a lot of attention.
That's a great question. So these types of masks are intended to be disposable. So normally they're one use and you dispose them. I'd say for an average person, or if you're working in one of these in a childcare facility, you want to wear one of these for the full shift, and ideally replace it for the next shift. If you're using like you would if you're using surgical masks, same thing. I'd wear it for the shift and then dispose it. And I'd have a backup for the shift in case it gets soiled or if it rips or tears. Cloth masks can be reused. You can wash them gently. So that's how we should treat this. And one of the reasons I wrote this article last week is really to hopefully spur the production of these better masks in the United States, because these are really 50-cent masks. An N95 should cost 50 cents. The problem is we're starting to see these sold for $5, $6, $8. And so that gets very expensive, obviously, to be using one of these fresh every day. Some of the other ones, the KF94s, I've seen for $1 a mask, sometimes $2 a mask. And importantly on masks, I should say, you want to pick your mask based on the activity and the level of risk associated with that activity. If you're at a park or you're not around people indoors, a good cloth mask is good. A good 3-layer surgical mask is fine. If you're in a higher risk setting, you're working in close contact with other people for many hours at a time, this is when you're going to want one of those better masks, either the better mask we talked about or the double masking combination of surgical masks with good cloth mask.
And Joe, are there specific mask recommendations for children?
There are not. It's the same factors. It's filtration and fit. But again, because kids are less likely to transmit and less likely to get it, I don't think kids need these better KF94, KN95 masks, N95 masks. I think kids with a good 2 or 3 layer mask or a blue surgical mask, I think that's really quite good.
And where can folks purchase carbon dioxide monitors?
Yeah, these are tricky. You can buy these, if you look online for a carbon dioxide sensor, you don't need a scientific or medical grade instrument, right? You want one that's just pretty accurate. I'm using one called an Aranet 4. I like this brand. I have no stake or ownership in this company. I just happen to like it. It's a simple interface, really easy to use. There's a whole bunch of these out there, and you don't need it to be, extraordinarily accurate. I would say one thing if you're going to use one of these devices, because the calibration is quite important. If you get one of these, take it outside before you do anything else and make sure it's reading at about 400 parts per million. That's the CO2 concentration, roughly, that you'd expect outdoors. If it's reading really wildly different from that number, it's telling you something's off in the monitor. So go outside, make sure you have about 400, 425. Unfortunately, it could be as high, it could be higher, but around that. Then you can bring it indoors and measure your CO2 concentration. Mine happens to be going up while I'm talking. It was sub 800 before, but I'm generating a lot of CO2 right now, but still pretty good ventilation in my office.
I have just two more questions now in the queue here so far, and one has to do with do plants help clean the air?
Good question, and the answer is no. Plants do not help clean the air. They can remove some chemicals, but the reality is that the rate of removal is very slow compared to rates of removal through other mechanisms like ventilation. And the only way plants would help clean the air is if your room looked like a rainforest. You would need that kind of density of plants everywhere. And so, plants have a lot of other benefits for our mental health, biophilic design, right? Connections to nature, but they're not actually cleaning the air.
And then the final question that I have in the queue is, what about air ionizers?
Yeah, you want to avoid ionizers. Ionizers can generate ozone. That's a respiratory hazard. They can also generate formaldehyde. That's a respiratory hazard. They can generate ultrafine particles. That's a respiratory hazard. And we have other methods to clean the air that are cheaper and don't produce any of these secondary hazards. So if that technology was what was needed to protect us from COVID, I'd be the first to say, let's do it. But the reality is we have a lot of other methods we talked about for the past hour that are more effective, less expensive, and don't generate other potential harmful pollutants.
And another question just popped in is, what about the use of face shields in combination with a mask? Is that something, is there an appropriate use for those?
Yeah, so I'd say masks are more important than face shields. Face shields, if you're going to be, in a hospital, I think is a good idea because that's guarding against like these ballistic droplets. But really, a mask stops the spread of those two. And in most places, we're not so worried about, doing an aerosol generating procedure like in a hospital. So, and importantly, face mask alone, a face shield alone is not enough because the small aerosols just go right around. So I have to run to my next event. So let me just say a final thing here. It's really great that you're doing this. I appreciate being invited. I think one of the hardest things to do through this whole pandemic for everybody is to make sense of all the information that comes at us every day. So I hope that helped clarify some thinking around healthy building strategies, how to keep yourself safe, better masking, and happy to have follow-up, and we'll continue to work with Chris and others to provide additional guidance to childcare. Yeah.
Thanks again for your time. And I want to thank all the providers too that are in attendance. And thank you for what you do for our kids. And I can turn it back over to the folks at the Office of Early Childhood.
Great. Thank you so much, Chris. Thank you, Dr. Allen. So we just want to take a minute to do a little bit of wrap up. I think we've all heard a lot of science. We have some note-taking going on behind the scenes, and I'm sure that you all noticed that everything that we talked about growing up about science is right here, and we're learning so much as time goes by about COVID-19. So some really simple things to do right away. We've talked about outdoor air. We talked about the use of the MERV 15 filters or MERV 13 or higher filters, portable air filters. So some things that are really important to look at what's within your scope of influence right now, and then what we can look at down the road. And as Dr. Chris Zavitas said, we're working on this at the OEC with FEMA's help to be able to help childcare providers in bigger, more complex ways too down the road. So we want to thank everybody for their time. Just a couple of announcements too. We do have another webinar coming up that is following along with this series about air quality and healthy best practices, whether it's facilities or your practices with children. So please watch for an announcement about our webinar, Warm Attitudes Toward Cold Play, where we will hear from some currently licensed providers about their real life practices to ensure that children have great outdoor activities, they have the right gear, they have the greatest experiences, all while keeping them very healthy and helping with that indoor air quality. We also have some sessions coming up next week that you should watch for if you are a Spanish speaking childcare provider. Women's Business Development Council has 2 programs next week that they will be posting shortly on the listserv about applying for PPP. So on the 10th at 7 p.m. for sole proprietors, so if you're a family home provider, especially for you, and on the 12th at noon for centers, programs with employees. So we hope that you'll take advantage of those in Spanish as well. Please remember that this is recorded, so you can come back to this. There's a lot of information in it, and there are many slides that you might want to go back to and take a look at over time. I think that's it for today. We just want to thank you so much for your participation. You had so many great questions. If we did not get to all of them, please know that we do review them all and they will inform our practices as we move forward and our upcoming events as well. We hope that you stay well and we hope that you enjoy the rest of your day. Again, we can't thank enough Dr. Joe Allen and Dr. Chris Zavitas for all of their work to help Connecticut childcare providers move forward in healthier ways. Have a great day, everybody.